today we are so fortunate to have a dear friend and an extraordinary visual artist, Kevork Mourad. We had the privilege of working with him for our program, An Armenian Odyssey, that we presented at the Washington National Cathedral on March 4th last year. Kevork, for him, music is really an essential part of his work. We will see that tonight. And he's constantly collaborating with extraordinary orchestras and ensembles all over the world. Just to mention one, he collaborates constantly with the famous Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road Ensemble. But please join me welcoming our guest today. Welcome, Kevork. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, dear Angel. Thank you. And so great to see many familiar faces. Thank you, Michelle, for the introduction. And Mary, so good to see you. So I love it. I feel like this is a wonderful way to see again our family and friends. So I want to start with thanking Post-Classical Ensemble to make this incredible opportunity for me to collaborate with them. I think I will start with probably the latest one, which is the Armenian Odyssey. There, I became familiar with many of the members, and I became very good friend with Joe Horowitz. I had the privilege to know his writings, his works. So it's fantastic. So I was born in Syria. Unfortunately, many people think I was born in two different cities at the same time. So I'll explain to you, this is crazy. So on paper, it says I was born in Kamishli, which is northeast part of Syria. It's mainly populated by Kurdish ethnicity. But originally, I'm born in Aleppo. But what happened is, after I was born in Aleppo, my parents went back to Kamishli, and I was registered there as being born in Kamishli. So Kamishli has this wonderful kind of thing to offer to Syrian culture, which is Kurdish music and Kurdish traditional things. My grandfather, he was troubadour there, and he played tambur, and he learned Kurdish music. Being Armenian, he wanted to learn this language, and he created music, and that had tremendous impact in the way I respond to music. So for you to know how I combine these two worlds together, I think my grandfather, actually his nickname is Tamburban, the tambur, which is like the string instrument player. So that's a little introduction for where I am. And after that, I went to Armenia to study art, illustration and bookmaking. And then I wanted to take the idea of illustration to illustrate sound. So I started thinking about me mainly taking the sound and interpreting the way I see the sound and creating a layer over existing sound with visual works.
So I'm very excited about the next part of our conversation, which is, how do you work? And what are the tools that you use? Can you show us how, let us enter in your workshop and show us your work.
So what I do, as soon as I get, let's say, commission or ideas to collaborate with a musician or a composer, I want to learn so much about the structure of the piece. So that happens with many, many times of listening and discussions with composer and with conductor. I remember when I started working with you, you had flexibility in changing a tempo, and you had flexibility in changing the locations of the musicians because you had to put me there. So this is all takes an important kind of take or role in me creating the work. And then what I did many years ago, I come up with this idea, putting a paint in this little bottle there's a piece of metal that goes here. I think if Jaren is kind enough to show this little kind of a demo I did on piece of paper, he can show us. So again, the tool, and I have this tiny metal. I squeeze the paint. While the paint is wet, I can smear it. So it takes probably maybe less than a minute to dry. So if I wanted to work continuously without smudging, then I can smear it. It will smear only certain parts, not everywhere. So this acts like a sound in a way that you cannot go back to erase, or you cannot go back and to kind of edit what you did. It always moves forward.
That's really fascinating. Kevork, you have done, and you are constantly also working on installations. What is the reason of those installations? And what is behind, what do you want to convey with those installations?
So as I said, I'm originally a visual artist. I always wanted to draw and create works that has meanings in my life, in other people's life, because art need to have a message. Art need to be kind of a support in this very hard time. For example, when you're from the Middle East, you always know and hear that many places get bombed or get even erased from this planet, like historic sites like Palmyra, or places in old homes like Aleppo. So what happened, when I was creating works, I wanted these works to be a mirror to people. When people view my work, they somehow think to contribute in peace building in future of this planet. It doesn't matter where you come from. So with these installations, I created things, it's the closest thing for you to be in front of historic places, almost like you're in front of ancient historic sites. I don't want to say ruins, before ruins, but I invent them. It's not like I copy from there. I wanted to be the main point of this installation about the common memory. It's about when you look at the piece, you say, oh, I've been there, or I know this place. But that is exactly the point, the reason I make these installations, for you to witness something that you think is familiar to you. I think if Jaren is kind enough to share some of those, I can elaborate more on this. So my first one, I was privileged to do this wonderful installation at the Rose Art Museum. That's in Waltham, near Boston. So the piece on the left, on paper, 3 layers. Here, I was trying to figure out a way to capture time. I'm kind of in my mind presenting a piece about 3,000 years old. Every layer had kind of a slice of history. So the second one, this was done in Germany at the gallery that I've been working with, Kuchling Gallery. I called it Prometheus. It's there's many places you see here, how the eagle is trying to kind of attack Prometheus. It's kind of Prometheus is hidden in the back. And at the same time, I'm adding my own interpretation of ancient places, old places. So this last one, Time Immemorial, I created this one. This is actually on fabric. I created this in Armenia. The idea of kind of rebuilding, recreating the historic Armenian capital from the medieval time. The last one, Seeing Through Babel, I wanted to create an artwork to celebrate diversity and humanity. Here, I create this long one piece of drawing on fabric. When you wrap it, it becomes 3.5 meters. And I made 6 layers of the Tower of Babel. And I asked students in London, this was done in London, to help me to carve the windows. And behind the windows, it's the alphabets. This languages that our ancestors spoke to us. Doesn't matter where you come from, because in the Tower of Babel, they were speaking one type of language, and they were trying to reach God. And God said, enough is enough. I'm going to stop for you to build this tower, and I'm going to change your language so you don't communicate with each other. So inside is all calligraphy, different languages. I invented it. It doesn't say anything here, but it's about celebrating diversity and humanity. Here it is. I'm inside of this piece and feeling almost like it's a spiritual place.
I mean, I know that for you, the idea of knowing different cultures as a way of understanding is crucial. I mean, I think it's a constant in your work, your obsession for diversity, for knowing the other. That it really shows in all your work. So before we go to our extraordinary project together, an Armenian Odyssey, although you already mentioned before that how music got into you, but there is a point in your career in which you feel now is the moment to incorporate music into my work. When that happened, is that something that happened gradually, and then you at some point you just realize, okay, I'm already immersed in that, or there was kind of an epiphany there when you said, music, I need music to express myself too?
So I could answer this in one. It was a gradual move from a place where I was in my studio painting. A friend of mine came in with a trombone. He wanted to practice next to me. And at first I was annoyed. I was too polite to tell him that, this is not the place for you to practice. But he was a very kind man, and he wanted me to get exposed to American jazz. He came from America to Armenia to learn about Armenian music. So he started playing there. I noticed that my lines were changing. When I was creating the line, it was more than what I could control. There was kind of a music influence on my lines. And when I started paying attention, we did it several times, I realized this could be interesting in a way. Maybe I could also influence, I could also inspire him. So when I told him that, he was very eager to try that. So we did this experimental performance in Armenia in 1997, which we didn't prepare anything. We didn't rehearse. We wanted to somehow be pure, how we could influence each other. So I was getting inspired by his sound, and he was getting inspired by my lines. So it was like kind of a circular approach. And after that, I was fortunate to come to the United States. I got invited to visit and to explore the art in the United States. And in Santa Cruz, I discovered flamenco music. And when you hear and when you witness flamenco, you cannot sit quietly. You want to be a dancer. For me, to be a dancer is to draw, So when I was drawing, I felt like I was dancing with them. And the more I explored this, the more I felt that, wow, this is amazing. And then the next thing, I was also for cross country, and we arrived to New Orleans. And in New Orleans, this was 1998, I saw this incredible phenomenon, music. It's almost like it's a museum of musicians everywhere in the street. They're performing. I wanted to capture that. I sat and I realized that they're the one actually drawing. The musicians are the one held my hand and creating this. And it was just like flowing without me trying anything. It was like just this water flowing. So that was kind of, that created this assurance moment that I want to create things with music. But of course, next stages, I started thinking, I want to be on the stage, kind of creating something much more meaningful and deep instead of just being, improvising. And I met the wonderful clarinetist and composer from Syria, Kenan Azme. Together, we created the Epic of Gilgamesh. Epic of Gilgamesh was a very timely piece. We created in response to the invasion, the American invasion of the Iraq, where lots of artwork was getting looted there. And we wanted to kind of document that and support the ancient artifacts, which belong to all of the humanities. And we created that piece, and it was a huge success. So I felt like organically it came from somewhere where I was getting inspired by music. At the end, I created a piece. So we did one small project at Juilliard with Kenan Azme. And then the next thing is Yo-Yo Ma heard it, and he invited me to go to Tanglewood to meet him. And in my mind, Yo-Yo Ma, everyone knows, is this legendary musician. He's not going to even remember my name or who I am. When he saw me from distance, he's like, Kevork! He gave me this big warm hug. He said, we love you. We want you to be part of our family. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I'm like, I'm just, this is too much. He's like, come here. Let's eat together. Let's drink together. And it was a very amazing and wonderful way to start this career. And then the next thing, I became American citizen. And he sent me this wonderful bottle of wine. And he said, the very first thing, we want to send you with Circle Ensemble to Japan. And we went to Japan. That's how I started everything. Yeah.
Fantastic, Kevork. Well, I met you 3 years ago. Actually, I gave you a bigger hug than Yo-Yo Ma, as I recall. And we work on an incredible project that we are going to talk about later. And then, of course, I immediately thought of you for our wonderful project, An Armenian Odyssey, which we presented. It's very moving to say this, but that was the last performance at the Washington National Cathedral before the pandemic started, March 4th, 2019. We ended the performance at the cathedral with an extraordinary musical experience there. Kevork, do you think, why don't we show the clip of the ending of the Armenian Odyssey and we talk afterwards?
Sure,
or do you want to talk a little before? Why don't we do that? Jaron, would you please show that? Bravissimo, Kevork. It's very moving to watch these images, our last live performance before all these terrible times. Anyway, we will be back. We are planning on wonderful new things. I just wanted to mention to our audience, many of the people that are with us today were there that night. And the music, it was actually written for the occasion by an extraordinary Armenian composer, Vache Sharafian, and the phenomenal cellist, Narek Hagnatharian, was the soloist. Actually, the Cello Concerto is the ending of the performance, and that was already written by Vache. Kevork, tell us about this experience for you and what you wanted to convey there with your images.
Yeah, actually, it is very moving. I feel like, when you have a performance like this, it's very powerful. You have so much responsibility here to capture a culture, and plus at the same time to create awareness about diversity and live together in peace, because And it was the last performance before the pandemic. I remember after that, when we came home, all of my projects was shut down. So this project is actually the second, it's almost kind of the second episode of what I did at the Metropolitan Museum, where Joe Horowitz saw and invited me to work on this piece. So in this work, when you and Joe asked me to collaborate with you, you gave me the freedom to choose the composer, which is an incredible privilege for visual artists to look for a composer to work with. So the first part was completely new. Vache Sharafian wrote it for this. I asked him to write for this because I already worked with him at the Metropolitan Museum's Commission. So I wanted to do this with Vache in a way that's capturing almost like 1,000 or several thousand years of history, of Armenian history in this. So before 1915 and after 1915. So what's 1915? 1915, unfortunately, it was the Armenian genocide, and many of my ancestors and many of Armenian ancestors, they fled the atrocity of Ottoman Empire. And that's how we end up growing up in the Middle East. So it's not like we, wanted to only grow up in Middle East with our own free will. So we were forced to go there, and we were first refugees. And the Syrian and Arab community, they welcomed us, and they gave us all the rights to keep our language and the culture and the church and the school, everything. So we flourished there in Syria. And I wanted to capture this also from Sayat-Nova's point of view. Sayat-Nova was this troubadour. His father was born in Syria, and he was born in Tbilisi, Georgia. And he became the court musician, phenomenal saz and kamancha player. And he single-handedly rose through his music, very, very high-ranking, musician, court musician. And he was a bit crazy in a way that so many of us artists are crazy. He fell in love with King's wife and many other beautiful people there. And he was exiled from the court. But what he did, he composed with 4 different languages. He was Armenian. He wrote in Persian, in Georgian, and also Turkish. So what's interesting about him, he wanted to be this the cultural figure that there's no border for music. And of course, there's no border for art. So I wanted to celebrate that the guy from 18th century, he was way ahead of his time to create works about diversity. So I created this first part until 1915. And then I came back presenting what happened after 1915. And we kind of, at the end, what we saw here, it's the Velvet Revolution, which happened, I think, 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago. And I wanted to show that culture matters. Artists are very important in any time. Politicians, we will forget them. Many politicians around the world have been forgotten, but not artists. Composers and artists, it's been always remembered. So at the end, when you see the figures standing from the crowd, is Sayat-Nova, is a troubadour. He left all this legend, and we see lots of artifacts rising in the air. So I wanted to capture our rich history and share it with the world. We always get inspired by each other, and we need to create beauty and share it with the world and to create better tomorrow.
Thank you, Kevork. Why don't we talk now about the work that you have been doing in isolation during a COVID time? I think we have more clips. You want us to show the clips, and maybe you can explain over the clips what we have?
Sure. So during the pandemic, I was, if Jared, you want to stop here so I can talk, if you can pause on this, that would be great. I was supposed to have a solo exhibit at the Spurlock Museum, that's in Champaign, Illinois, kind of commemorating the Armenian genocide and to talk about what happened to my ancestors through art. So I was supposed to create this large installation, but of course, COVID kind of took away. but the director of the museum, she was so kind, and she understood that we are all going in very hard time. She asked me to create a piece for their collection. So I created this piece kind of inspired by this pandemic. There are windows, and inside the windows, if you see it closely in real, if you're in front of it, you might see people kind of creating and living their life in isolation. So almost like each window is a different universe. So I call it a world through windows.
So let's go to the next slide
one.
then.
Yeah. Next one is, this is my very first opera. It's Beethoven's, the only opera, Fidelio. I created with Korean National Opera. I made this one remotely. I created it during pandemic, and I sent them the video, and they actually did it with the real audience. This was done 3 months ago. And the last one, which is this wonderful experience working with 2 different choruses, Women Sing and Electra. Electra is based in Vancouver, Women Sing in San Francisco. The composer, Sean Kushner, he wrote most of the works, and it's about celebrating this holiday season with kind of giving hope to people that we're going to be coming out of this pandemic soon. It was an hour-long piece released on the solstice day, 21st of December. But during the pandemic, what happened is I wanted to tell the world, show the world that I'm still alive. And the way I can share that is through creativity, to just keep working and sharing with the world. So I was creating every morning live drawing on Instagram, and I call it coffee time, sketching during coffee time at 7 o'clock in the morning. So that was probably one of the most amazing thing that I did, in a way that without expecting anything in return, drawing and sharing with my friends and followers. And through that, I came out of this dark time very easily, in a way that many people ask me to create work with them. So I work with composers after that. I got many commissions, and I feel like it's important to not think about to get anything in return. Just share it. Just give this positive vibe. I'm sure you're going to get something in return. And that was the situation when I started creating these works. And then the next thing is Los Angeles Master Chorale asked me to create a piece. Actually, all these things are available on Vimeo. Whenever you go to my site, Vimeo, you'll see all of this available. You can see more after this. You don't have to only see this here.
Fantastic. But I think we have one more clip with music, don't we, Jaron? That
yes.
You wanted to show?
Yes. Yes. This is with Lisa Stepanova. She's this wonderful pianist. Let me say something before we go in. She filmed herself in her basement playing piano. And because we were all in this isolation, I wanted to create work outside of this Zoom format in a way that she kind of can fly and be in the nature to illustrate the music. This piece is called Rain Outside the Church. And what happened is she was creating this album dedicated to the refugees and homage to what's happening around the world. This composition is by composer Rinaldo Moyo. So you can see what I did with it.
This is extraordinary. Fantastic, Kevork. Phenomenal.
Thank you. By the way, I was going to say, because the Zoom format is giving this jittery kind of a streaming, maybe we could put those links for people to view properly later. So whatever we have, because this is available for free, people can watch this. So I know it was a bit frustrating to see this jittery thing, but that's the Zoom format. It's not from us. It's not from Jaren, but we're giving our best here.
Absolutely. We will do that for sure. No doubt. So my last question before we go to our audience is, let's talk about the future. Let's be optimistic. So what is in the future? I love it. I love it. So Master Peter's Puppet Show. This is actually the piece. Look at that. Don Gaiferos. So Kevork and I met in New York for the creation of this extraordinary puppet show opera that is by the Spanish composer Manuel de Falla, Master Peter's Puppet Show, which is inspired in a chapter of Don Quixote in which he's watching a tableau, a puppet show, and he gets so involved into the action because exactly, the Muslims are kidnapping the princess, and then Don Gaiferos is going to do a rescue, and there is a persecution, and then Don Quixote gets so excited he destroys completely the retablo. So we are going to do it in Washington, aren't we? We need to present this in Washington. We're still waiting for things getting better. But it was such a great experience working with you on that I wanted to bring you for that to Washington. Tell us about your experience with this piece.
So this work, it's very different approach from anything else I've done. So what I did, I created these characters, drew them and created these hinges. This is an old, traditional way of the shadow puppetry. People in Greece done it, in ancient Armenia, and all this. So what I did, I created this and I put green screen and I moved them step by step. So I did one, took picture. I did one, took picture. And so I created this narrative where Manuel de Falla want us to see. On top of it, I was doing also live drawing. So what I did, let's say I will draw the contour of this guy and on white or black paper. And then the next thing is this will appear and you'll see this guy is running away, or, you see these horses. So I created this little castle. I have many, of course. I'm only showing to you like just very little bit. So I have tons. So imagine how much work gone in this. If I show you, like, look how many characters here. They're all real. They're all actual drawing and cutouts, and it's incredible.
Fantastic.
So it's a different way than any other Manuel de Falla, because most of the people who did this project, they did it in kind of a traditional puppetry, but mine was done on a table. I created this kind of a curtain. I open, I draw, and then the animation kind of appears. And what's interesting, this targets different ages. I've seen little kids enjoy this, and I've seen people our age enjoy this. So it's somehow, I felt like I entered a different genre in creating this. And I hope you guys can come and see it in DC. And I'm thinking to change a little bit, to add a newer take on this, because I've done at least 3-4 performances of it. And we would, as Angel said, we did this in New York 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
Almost 3, yes, almost 3.
Yeah.
Well, we will. It will happen. Don't worry. Okay, so we are going to give now the voice to our audience, but please don't leave after the last question, because Kevork has created a premiere for tonight.
Yes.
And so don't leave. Nobody moves after the last question. But I'm going to let Michelle now lead the questions from the audience.
Thank you, Angel, and thank you, Kevork. This has been such an amazing program. And to just listen to you and how you work and what you've done has just been inspiring. And I can't wait to see the last clip of the night where you're going to do a brand new piece for us. And so please stay tuned. But we do have a few questions. One of the questions we have is, it's clear that you have a very unique style. You have your own style, and it seems very strong. How did that come about? How did you develop that look and feel?
Thank you, Michelle, for helping us to make this happen. I feel like the style needs to be the last thing you are worried about, because you shouldn't be worried about style. You only need to work. Once you work, you kind of refine your own tools. So, for example, if you have in front of you 12 different colors and you're using 12 of them, but with time, you're going to eliminate some. So with years of working, you're going to choose your favorite colors to work with, your favorite tools to work with. And I think I still don't know. I'm glad that you're saying I have this strong style, but I don't see my work as like I have my own style. I just do it because this is the only way I know how to do it.
Fascinating. That absolutely makes sense, and it's such a beautiful way. So it's an organic process, is what you're showing, of sort of self-discovery and artistic discovery.
And with lots of work. We should always work.
Let's not forget that. You mentioned color, and I did notice that there wasn't, it's a very sort of, maybe that's black or blue and white, except for there was in the light of hope, there was a little window that had a little bit of color. So I take it that you don't use a lot of color that really, is that black that you're using, black on white, black ink?
You know, I don't want to use the word compete, but to be able to match sound is very fast. In very little time, sound can illustrate so much imagery. But the image, you need to create so much to be able to create imagery. So for that, I like to use less to create more. So for me, instead of just thinking about mixing colors to create something, I have this one thing, which is either black and white or the opposite. So for me to have that line kind of follows the sound, or the sound follows my line, it's important because it's almost like in your mind, you're following this wave. So it basically, that's the reason I try to kind of be simple to illustrate more of the sound.
Amazing. Are there any other questions from the audience? I want to give you all another minute or two. If not, I have one more. For your installations, can you tell us a little bit more how you create those? You mentioned fabric, but then they also look like maybe paper. Are they always hung? Can you tell us a little bit more how you develop ideas?
When I was telling earlier about my degrees in art, one of them is printmaking. So in the printmaking, the easiest thing to explore is monotype. So what's monotype? Monotype is to print once, mono. So it means you could create paint, whatever you want to create on a glossy surface, could be glass or could be metal or plastic. So you create that while it's wet, you just turn it and just press it down on fabric or paper. So most of my works that I do in installations or paintings, I create a drawing, I create on different surface, and then I print it. So why? Because you can create so much in little time. Okay. And again, there's not, you cannot erase it. Once you press it, that's it. Once the paint is on the surface, it's done. So I do it, I started on paper, but the paper was very hard to find with large formats, but then also it's fragile and it's not very easy to transport to store. So just by pure accident, when I was in Armenia to create the Time Immemorial, I was invited by this wonderful Italian organization to create an installation there in Armenia. I realized they don't have that large paper. And I had only 6-7 hours to decide what I'm going to do. I went to the fabric store. I said, I'm just going to do it. I don't care. I know this is going to be the last time that I'm working on different material, but I'm going to do it. When I did on fabric, it was incredible. It felt that very natural to work on this beautiful, tightly woven Egyptian fabric. And then the next thing is it was very easy to store. You can just fold it, like very similar to this. You can fold it and it's done. You don't ruin this. You can just iron it and hang it. So the idea of hanging, I wanted to look like it similar to the ancient artifacts. When you're standing in front of it, it looks like they're stones. Yeah. So the material is hidden because the message and the visual imagery is much more stronger than the material. So you're standing in front of these gigantic historic sites. And that has a huge impact on the viewers. And then the next one that I'm creating very soon, which is actually, I'm starting on Monday, I call it Memory Gates. The idea of the viewers can walk in the drawings. So if I'm creating this archway, I can cut that and viewers can see that you can go through time. You can walk through these passageways. So the reason I wanted to do that, because the pandemic created these isolations and created this situation where we are kind of trapped. When you come out of it, your senses are now wanted to explore more. You want to see art, but this time art is everywhere. So that is the reason I wanted to create this next installation, which is immersive experience.
That's fantastic. Well, I know we can't wait to see that, and we can't wait for you to come to DC. There is I think John Farina, do you have a question? We have time for one more question.
Hello. Thank you for the fascinating presentation. I was just sitting here with my 4-year-old grandson, and he wanted to watch cartoons. He loves cartoons. He loves puppets. His grandfather has developed, for whatever reason, a resistance to puppets, or a resistance, a barrier somewhere in my imagination, in my habits, to graphic images. And I've been seduced by, like so many of us, photographic or video or electronic images. How do you address that in your work? I mean, you're obviously someone who appreciates the graphic image, who appreciates the 3D existence of a puppet, but you run up against this, I'm sure I'm not alone. Is it a habit that we've just been seduced by? Is it a lack of imagination? What is it that makes many of us resistant to these other types of images?
It's a fantastic question because, when you have a specific aesthetic to appreciate things, and you definitely resist, you'll say the same thing in music, by the way. There's certain type of music we resist, but it's a lot in puppetry because there's some grotesque, exaggerated way of expressing it. So you think this is not my way of seeing something with Manuel de Falla, for example, and all this. But if you do some more research and see what they did in the past, like the ancient shadow puppetry, and there's so many beautiful nuances and aesthetic they put in, it's impossible not to appreciate how much thought and artfulness went into it. But for us as an artist, when we survive with our creativity, we always need to reinvent ourselves to not get bored, because you cannot just create the same thing every day, every day, every day. So for me, when I got this commission to create this piece, at first I was thinking it's impossible for me to draw and create animations, because when Manuel de Falla was imagining this, it was more kind of in a three-dimensional settings. And I am not expert in this creating three-dimensional space. But when I created this puppetry, I feel like this is kind of almost primitive, but at the same time approachable in a way that I'm not using high-tech, like Disney-like animations to be able to kind of sell this and compete with Disney. No, it's an aesthetic that I feel like my ancestors used it, and it's done in Mediterranean culture, in Anatolian culture. And I feel like I am celebrating the ancient art form and being a storyteller. The storytelling, it's a huge thing in the Middle East. And I grew up in seeing how one person can reanimate the entire story, like Shahrazad and 1001 Nights and all that. So I understand what you're trying to express with your resistance, but at the same time, I know that we have very fine kind of aesthetic in what we like, what we don't like. but it's good to be open-minded, because sometimes when you're open-minded, you explore beautiful stuff and then you change your mind. Like food. Food is a fantastic example. You cannot just reject culture that you don't know what they're eating. Once you try it, you're like, wow, this is amazing.
That's so very, very true, Kevork. Thank you so much. Angel, I think it might be time. I want to turn the program back to you because it's getting late in the evening and we want to save time.
But we have Juan. I saw his fan. He wants to say, if you don't mind hearing him too.
Oh, well, okay.
Is it okay? Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Juan Puntes. Oh, now we are in trouble if Juan Puntes is asking questions.
But Juan, you're muted. You're muted, Juan. You're muted. Yes.
Mute my audio.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. This is a question for Angel.
Oh my God.
And thank you. Great to meet visual artists. I live amongst them, for good and for bad. Angel, when you're directing and you see his work in the background, flowing, steaming, do you get distracted? Do you get excited? Are you able to be directing with your hands and watching with your eyes? And what does that do to you that can reverberate into us, the public?
It's absolutely inspiring. Even if it's distracting, it's inspiring. So I don't mind. If the tempo gets a little slower because the emotion is there, it's even better. So it's really a treat. Juan, it's great to have you with us. Thank you. All right, so the surprise of the night, as you know, we have just released an extraordinary CD with music by Bernard Herrmann. So I told Kevork, would you like to create a visual work to the ending of the psychonarrative by Herrmann? And he most graciously accepted the challenge, and here we are. Bravissimo, Kevork.
Thank you.
Million thanks. My goodness.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Kevork, what a treat. We can't wait to have you with us in Washington. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Jaron. Thank you, our audience. Again, what a treat to be with you. And we wish you incredible success. I know you are going to be working like crazy, and we wait for you in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see everybody in person. We come out of this healthy and strong and even better. Thank you, guys. I see you on the other side.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.